Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Welcome to this week's Momentum. It is really great to have you tuning in. Thanks so much for spending some time with us this week as we delve into another show. And it's going to sound a little different this week because Des and I are actually in the same room, which doesn't often happen on Momentum, but we are in Perth, Western Australia, in studio together. Welcome.
It's great to be
to
here.
The West.
I don't feel any different. I feel just as old and senile as I normally
Well, that's a great way to start the show. Yeah, that's good, Des. Yeah,
yes.
Good to know you're firing on all cylinders.
It's all good.
we are going to get into a pretty heavy show, but before we do that, Des is just going to give you some ways of how you can connect with us here at Momentum.
Yeah, look, it's so important, guys, from lots of perspectives, but certainly our website, momentumaustralia.org, absolutely key to what we do, and it has a treasure of information, a treasure of YouTube videos that you can watch on various topics. All our podcasts are all there, and also you can support Momentum financially through our website by hitting the donate button. And we are a ministry. We run by the seat of our pants, really, but it's great to be able to do it, and we're blessed in doing it, so that's fantastic. And we've been so blessed to have an amazing care line. The Momentum care line is 1-800-000-MEN. That's 1-800-000-636. And we were blown away when we found we could get that number, that it's so easy for men to remember, 1-800-000-MEN. And just, by the way, there's over 50 guys every month who contact our care line, and I think that's fantastic. It's open 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Please reach out to the care line. And should I say, if something is critical in your life, reach out to Lifeline or Beyond Blue. Those organizations are there to help you in your immediate need. So I'll just say that.
For sure.
And also our YouTube channel, we've got this amazing Momentum for Men. We've taken a lot of our older shows, we've taken a video from that, and we now post it on YouTube. And so if you go into YouTube and search for Momentum for Men, it'll come up there, or you can get access to it through our website as well. Yeah. So all the ways you can contact us.
Engage with us here at Momentum. That's what we're here for. And when we started the show, it was really about just helping men all around Australia initially. And as it's turned out, it's all around the world through our podcast, listened to in 62 countries, which is awesome. And, Des mentioned the care line, and we just want to highlight that for you. It's there for you, right? If you need a chat about anything, even if you feel like it's trivial, it doesn't matter. If it's something that's weighing you down, you're not sure where to turn to, call the care line, have a chat. And we are all about connection here at Momentum. You'll hear that running through the show. That's the thread running through the show, is men need to get connected, and not just connected. And I just want to bounce off that and say, Des and I occasionally get to speak in men's groups, and I did in the last couple of weeks. And I brought the guys off after we'd done a bit of talking, brought the guys off into twos, and it was, you're never really sure how that's going to go initially. But after 15, 20 minutes, I'm looking around, and every single two was engaging in deep conversation. I'm like, this is awesome. This is what men need, a safe space to actually talk about some of this stuff. And they were all engaged. Actually, shutting them up was the problem. We had to get out by a certain time. I'm like, okay, guys, that's enough now. You can continue this later outside of here. But really good to get men connected, really good to get men talking. And if you don't feel like you've got a safe space, reach out to us at the website, momentumaustralia.org, or the care line, 1-800-000-636. And I will just say this before we launch into the show. We at Momentum, we kind of like to prod in a loving way, because we need to be prodded as men. And some of this that we're going to talk about today is potentially going to bring up some stuff for you. Just in advance, I'm going to warn you. Some of this may be triggered. It may bring some stuff up for you. Again, the care line number's there. The website's there. If you need professional help as well, then by all means seek that. But we are talking about generational trauma today. And as the saying goes, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. Well, there are some great examples and experiences of loving and healthy family units for most of us. That hasn't necessarily been the case.
And sadly, it's far from normal that many of us have grown in a somewhat unhealthy or dysfunctional family unit, or maybe not even a family unit at all. And we may even be exposed to intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, this can stem from biology, learned behaviors, and even the collective experiences of a group. with some research suggesting that trauma can affect a person's DNA and potentially influence the health of future generations.
We have an amazing guy with us today, counsellor and pastor Steve Wickham, who's a really dear friend. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks so much, Des, and Tim. Thanks for the welcome.
Yeah, it's great. You're going to help us to unpack what this looks like and how we can heal from generational trauma. So, we welcome you. It's great.
We also saved the light and fluffies for you, Steve, so thanks for stepping into that space.
Thank you.
We couldn't find a deep subject, so we just...
It's so important.
And again, we are all in studio, so it's going to sound a little different. There won't be a YouTube video for this because that was a whole other step. But as far as that, there'll be a good vibe today because we are in studio. So we're really looking forward to not only that, but also getting into this topic. Because, Steve, I mean, this is huge. And when we start unpacking this, people might realize actually that there is some of this stuff that they've perhaps never even acknowledged in their lives.
Yeah, of course. I think trauma probably plays a part in all of our lives. But for some of us or for some people, it is very sticky, and it's something that it is part of the journey for now until the end kind of thing. Yeah. But it's certainly a lot of help you can get.
I mean, initially when you think generational, right? I mean, the initial, I suppose, warning sign, red flag is that if it's generational, it's just my family. And if it's my family, then it's probably become normalized to me. This is just how we operate. Right? Yeah. And yet, again, for a lot of us, because we're in that and it's just become normalized, we don't recognize it because this is just how we operate as a family. It's only when we kind of come out from that or start doing some work, we go, oh, this is incredibly dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So how would you identify, I guess question for you, Steve, how would you identify the difference between the trauma that we face every day in our world, and we all have it, as you rightly said, but versus generational trauma? How would you distinguish between those two?
It's a tough one. I think if you look back, looking back at always looking through a rear vision mirror. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. You can look back maybe as you unpack it or as you identify it. The more you look at it, the bigger it can get. So it can actually be a great thing to identify, okay, this is my truth. This is what's happened as the lights come on, so to speak. But then there's a whole bunch of work that, that you were invited into. And I mentioned the word invited. It's not a very inviting word, but, the whole journey of unpacking that and seeking help and the pain and that sort of thing. But maybe just coming to understand triggers and why it's all come about. So it is part of the overall journey, from a pastoral viewpoint.
You mentioned the word triggers, which is interesting. So what sort of triggers would you expect to see if somebody's dealing with generational trauma? Because there's going to be men listening today who, probably have it in their lives, but, they think it's just, as you said, Tim, it's just their normal way of doing things.
Yeah.
It's what is their everyday.
How this family operates.
Exactly. So how would they identify that is something that's coming from their parents or their grandparents and so forth? How would they do that?
The four typical triggers, the easy ones are the fight trigger, the anger trigger, the flight or the withdrawal or the fear trigger. Right. There's also the freeze trigger. So sometimes we find we freeze and we don't know why, and there's a cognitive freezing there. But also the fawn trigger, so we people please. So those four are very, and I'm particularly, I'm very passionate about the anger, the fight trigger. Yes. I've battled with that myself, and I think as men, we actually liberate ourselves when we can explore that area, because oftentimes if we bypass our sadness, we go to anger. If we bypass our fear, we go to anger. And I think that's the key. Wow. Just opening up that and de-shamifying it, if that's a word, taking the shame away from it. And there's so much power in that.
I just want to repeat that. Can you just repeat? That was huge. When we bypass
if we bypass our sadness, primary emotion, bypass our fear, which is also a primary emotion, we don't like to go to these places as men.
So we go to anger.
I don't want to be scared. Yeah. I don't want to be sad. I've got it all together, got my life all together. I want to. But if I don't go to those places, those honest places, and that's what I love about Momentum, is that you go to the honest places. If we go to the honest places, we can be healed just by going to the sadness, going to the fear. That's the purity of that.
Interesting, hey, because, there's a quote that I read, and I think I've shared it on the show before. I sat with my anger long enough to know that it was grief.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yes.
And for me, in my 20s, particularly early 20s, before I became a Christian, I had a lot of anger. And I wasn't angry necessarily with people. I was just angry. And then when I started doing it, I'm like, oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff in my childhood that I was actually grieving.
Yeah.
That I was sad over, particularly my relationship with my mum or lack of relationship with my mum.
And in fact, trauma, it's a bit of a robbing. You know, it's you feel like we're robbed of something, robbed of saying that's the grief piece, isn't it? How do I reclaim this?
Yeah,
that's huge.
It is huge. Yeah, it's amazing. So how? I mean, we talk about identifying that trauma and recognizing it as generational, coming from parents or grandparents or whatever way that looks. So, how do you? I mean, you talked about recognizing the anger and wanting to know where that came from. How do you step back and say, I've got this stuff going on in my world, but I don't know what it is. I don't know where it stems from. Is there a process you can go through to identify that?
Being open, I think, going back into our past, looking at maybe a parents
as a person, or with somebody else.
I think it's wise to go with someone who's skilled in that area, who can guide the process. Definitely, but I know that many people go, and it's. I guess you could probably enlist all kinds of supports in that way, and it's probably not a one size fits all. I think multi-pronged approach. Go for that, but it is a journey. Essentially, looking back into the past and trying to reconcile those relationships with parents and other caregiving figures, and maybe even looking back another generation and seeing and acknowledging. We think of the World Wars, World War I, World War II, the trauma that's come out of that. We think if we're talking Indigenous people, the trauma that's been intergenerational through there. So it's actually trying to empathise, trying to find the sadness, go back to the sadness rather than the anger, go back and empathise with those parents who maybe were addicted or that's. Now that's a whole bunch of work, and that's years of. We're not going to arrive there immediately. It's not months, it's years of work, but it's valuable for us to invest in our lives because it only gets better. It only gets better from here.
Yeah.
This is a little side tangent. I want to come back to this because I think we're still really in the mucky stuff at the moment. But somebody said to me recently, and this is now, so my mum passed a few years ago. That was a whole different journey. Now my dad is getting on in life, and I've realized that there was some father stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And in one of the conversations I was having with somebody, she said to me, this is not about you waiting for your father to show up as a different father. This is now about how you show up as a different son.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's absolute gold.
That's amazing because you can't change your dad, right?
If I was holding a mic, I would have dropped it right out.
No, but it's true
because exactly this is like okay, but so now at the age of 51, I get a choice.
Yes,
as a son.
Yeah.
As a maturing, getting healthier, hopefully getting more healed son to determine how I want to show up in that relationship.
Yes.
The power is on me. I'm not waiting for my dad to show up as a different person. I just thought, I mean, that has radically shifted how I approached my relationship with my dad.
Yeah, in terms of ownership, it's huge, right? Because before you sit back and you say, hey, it's my dad's fault or it's my grandfather's fault.
Exactly, you shift the blame.
Right? Whereas now you're saying, I own this.
Yeah.
I'm the only person that can heal this.
Yes.
So, I will take ownership of it and I will, put the right structure in place or relationship in place to help that healing for you, but also for your dad, your grandfather, or grandmother, mother.
Well, there's so much we've yet to unpack. You did mention in a fleeting comment about shame, and I think that's got a lot to play in generational trauma. We are going to take a short break and come back. We're talking generational trauma with Steve Wickham, our special guest on this week's Momentum. It's going to be a very, very awesome second part of the show. We encourage you to come back in just a moment. And as we take a short break, have a look around our website, momentumaustralia.org. It is Momentum with Steve Wickham. Generational trauma is our theme. We'll see you on the other side of this break.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Welcome back. It is part 2 of this week's Momentum. Tim and Des with you as always. And of course, we've got our wonderful guest, Steve Wickham, in studio talking about generational trauma. And man, that first part of that show went incredibly quickly, and there's so much more to unpack. So let's get straight back in. Steve, let's just kind of set the starting point. We talked a bit about identifying things in ourselves. And you mentioned, I think for guys, a lot of it can kind of bury itself under anger. You know, when you actually bury down into that, there's some stuff under the surface there that actually would indicate that we might be holding something that could represent trauma. Let's pull out a little bit to the family, because as we started the show by saying, you know, generally in our family dynamic, it becomes our normal, so we're not sure what's necessarily healthy. How do we perhaps recognize in our family dynamic, and this is maybe our initial family or our extended family, that there's some stuff there that might indicate that there's trauma just happening throughout this family, that we can kind of go, okay, this doesn't feel right. There's something, you know, maybe it's unspoken stuff, maybe it's, we just don't talk about that, or, you know, those sorts of things. How do we pick up on this stuff in our family?
So there's a couple of things I think is all families that have dysfunctions. We're all in a family system. We've all got roles, and all families have dysfunctions. Hold that in tension with the whole idea that you can't change it. You've got to accept it and just empathise with where everybody's coming from. The role of empathy, sitting in someone else's shoes in our family, at least gives us the ability to back out of our own anger for a moment and just to try and understand. That's the kind of wisdom piece in all of this. But just understanding and accepting that all families have their dysfunctions. We're all human. From a Christian viewpoint, we're all sinners. You know, we all have a relationship with sin. And I think there's so liberating if we can actually look at ourselves, have a bit of compassion over others, but also look at my own contribution. What's my role in it? What's my role in the family? And understanding that it's hard. Once we have a role in a family, that's kind of set. It's set in that way.
Well, can I just talk about that for a second? Because I didn't want to make it my own experience, but I kind of felt like I was the black sheep in the family. And I'm sure there's other people listening that go, I can totally relate to that. Right. For whatever reason. And I know the reason, but especially on my mum's side of the family, with respect, I felt like I was the black sheep. My brother was the golden child, and I was the black sheep. I was the rebellious one. I was the one that went off the rails. So I kind of played that part, and to some degree, I still feel like I'm carrying that. And it's taken me a long time to kind of come through that and go, but because I wore that as the black sheep label, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And it's taken me a long time to kind of come out of that. So when you see that dynamic, how do we start?
So that's a very, very common dynamic. I mean, if you look at not so much the term black sheep, but also scapegoating. So there is a theology in the Old Testament in Leviticus chapter 16. And I think it's around verse 8, it talks about the scapegoat. So it's actually a Christian theology or a Hebraic theology where you cast the sin on the sheep, or on the lamb, and send it out into the wilderness. That's the scapegoat, or you send it out onto the goat out into the wilderness. That's the scapegoat. Now, all communities tend to, if they're honest, they tend to try and find a scapegoat.
They have a scapegoat.
Yep.
Wow.
That's and it's just implicit in all communities. So as a leader in a community, being aware of that, okay, the Jesus piece in that, how do we make sure everybody's included and we're fair to people? And okay, if there's performance issues or that sort of thing, we manage those. We've got to be really fair about that.
Okay, so are we saying then, just to clarify that, most families will have a scapegoat?
I think
not all, but most.
Not all. I think there are probably a lot of families that don't. But I would say that it's a real threat and a real temptation for communities or families. If you look at a family as a mini community, to have when push comes to shove, who do we put the sin on?
Yeah, who's to blame?
Yeah.
And
I mean, that can go the other way. That can definitely be justified. Somebody maybe there is a person in there that's in the family that's not performing up to par, you know, in a family norms concept.
Okay. So if somebody listening right now feels like they're the scapegoat, A, how do they recognize that? And B, how do they start to deal or heal with that? From that.
Well, maybe even just listening to this, I think there's probably a penny dropping for some, and maybe it's a journey that they've already been on. They already know that, and they're grappling with it, and the very sad thing is if you go from one community to another, and you feel like you've got that clung to you, that's kind of become a role that's not just in a family, but it's gone to different places.
Yes, you take it with you.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge to try and break out of and trying to work through. Okay, how do I reform my role on inverted commas?
So how does that play out? I mean, if you're, let's say, a guy and you've got this feeling of guilt and this feeling that you're the scapegoat, or you're the guy who's done everything wrong, then you go into a marriage, and that is morphed into your marriage. I mean, that has potential to destroy your marriage, just because of that generational trauma coming through your life. So how would you stop that? How would you, you've got the mindset that you're the scapegoat, but when you go into a new relationship, how do you try to stop that coming into that world? How would you do that?
I think just being honest and having embracing the whole idea that I can work through this and I can become better. But it is part of it is actually facing. Is there anything there that I can do? Is there any sin that I can wrestle with?
Yes.
I can be honest with that, and then own that I'm actually I'm doing as much as I can. It's not all on me. There are others as well. But going into a marriage, into that kind of situation, you don't want to be going disempowered, and it's a very disempowered place to be the black sheep, isn't it?
Yes.
So how do I stay in my own stuff? I often use that term in counselling. Stay in my own stuff, but also allow people to be accountable for their own behaviour as well.
So then let's flip that on its head and go to us now listening as parents who have small children. How do we stop or minimize the effect of generational trauma on the next
I love
generation?
where this is going, and I think we all have a goal to minimise it, and so it's a great goal. Getting there is another journey. I think we're all parents of adult children. You look back, and none of us are perfect. We've all got it wrong.
We'd all look back and go, I could have done that differently.
But one of the most powerful things, and I say it every time I get a chance to speak on justice, make sure our children receive justice from us. So we are modelling apologies. We're fessing up. We are, and we don't have to make it unsafe for them. But if we have an interpersonal thing for them, or they see it, well, we got to put all the pieces back together for them, so they can see the justice.
Yes,
it's really important.
Yeah,
I suppose the best way we can limit it is for us to do the work. Right?
The only way, probably.
Right? Is for us to do the work. And again, we may not be able to get mum and dad or whatever into that space, but we can take the responsibility to go, I'm going to heal my own stuff so that I can show up as a better dad, right? A better father, better mother if you're listening and you're female. Like, if we take the responsibility to go, I recognize this stuff in me. I may be able not to be able to change the family dynamic, but I can at least change me.
That is powerful.
Yeah, get rid of the anger, get rid of the doubts and all the things that encompass you. And portray to your children a loving, caring, God-filled relationship.
And I just think about the feedback I've received from my kids. When they see that justice, you see the feedback. You see the freedom and the relief and the peace that comes into their lives. There's nothing like that in a relational setting.
Recapping real quickly, recognizing generational trauma or trauma in our own lives. Top 2 or 3 things that we could look at and go, okay, that's the starting point. That's the awareness piece. What are people looking for?
First of all, be honest, but don't be scared. We look at our truth and we look at what we've been through and that sort of thing. It's very scary and very re-traumatizing in some ways, but having the courage to just be honest, but go there with support. So don't go there alone if you don't feel like you can. Get your support, enlist support, but be honest. And we talk a lot about insight. As psychologists, psychiatrists talk a lot about insight. Can I see my reality? Can I see my impact on the world? That's the secret to life, I think. Seeing my impact on the world, seeing how I see myself, and having a good self-image, an appropriate one, is really good.
I think also as well, we've talked about, and I think all of us in this room, we've talked about the fact that we're now all grandparents as well, but we've had to have conversations with our adult children, accepting our own responsibility as parents where we've missed it. quickly the importance of that. Just the apology, and even it may be that it doesn't necessarily change the relationship, but I've owned up, I've had the conversation, I've taken responsibility. The power of that.
And I think staying in the sorry, so you don't have to stay in the shame. You're not staying in the shame, but actually, as I own my apology and I stay in my stuff, stay in my apology, I always did the wrong thing in that particular thing. There's something that's freeing for me in that, but it's also great for our ongoing relationship. Is that our children can really trust that.
Yes.
And they need that. Our children need to have a reliable, it's not up and down, it's a reliable truth.
Wow.
So good.
There's more we could unpack on generational trauma. We might actually come back and do a second show because this is such a big topic, but hopefully that's given you some insight today into what to start looking at in your own life and in your family life to go, hey, maybe I can start doing some healing here, not just for my own benefit, for my family's benefit, and of course for the next generation if I have kids. Generational trauma, that's been our topic today. Again, if this has brought some stuff up for you, we encourage you to seek professional advice if you need to. Give the Caroline a call, 1-800-000-636. Reach out to us at Momentum if you need to, momentumaustralia.org. If you're feeling that it's got some stuff there, by all means, reach out to us, reach out to somebody, and start this process of healing. This is big stuff that we're talking about. This is not overnight stuff. And we just want to encourage you to step into that space lovingly with yourself and maybe with a professional as well. Steve, thank you. There's a lot in that, and you've done that really, really great justice, and with sensitivity as well. So, generational trauma on Momentum. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Des.
Good.
And I encourage you, as always, to check out the website, momentumaustralia.org. We'll catch you next week.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.